All right there, everyone. Brussels backs down as the Nationalist Populist Coalition of Five Star and Northern League are restored to Italian government. That's what we'll be talking about on today's video. Well, it's been quite a week, to say the least. We've called this the week the globalist empire attempted to strike back, particularly in terms of the imprisonment of Tommy Robinson and what's nothing less than a Brussels-backed coup that refused the cabinet proposed by the winners of the last national election in Italy. This was the longest ever political crisis in the history of the Italian Republic. It's not had a functioning government in nearly 90 days, 88 to be exact. And just when it looked like the populist Five Star and nationalist Northern League were ready to govern, the Italian president, who was appointed by pro-EU globalists, he turned around and rejected the cabinet and instead attempted to put in his own pro-Brussels prime minister and interim cabinet made up of technocrats and bureaucrats and the like. Well, as you can guess, that didn't play well in the eyes of the Italian public. You have to remember that back on March 4th, the entire nation went to the polls and 70% of the voting population voted for populists and nationalists. And so while none of the parties got the magic 40% needed to form a majority in their representative parliament, it was clear that the populist party Five Star and the Nationalist Party Northern League were the two clear winners. And they were the natural anti-EU, anti-Brussels, pro-Italy first coalition. So when this president of Italy, who by the way is appointed, he's not even elected, when this appointed president turned around and said, no, you can't have your coalition. I mean, he was reported to have said that this was going to be a lesson to the Italian people. If you could believe that, this was going to be a lesson to the Italian electorate. He was going to install pro-globalist administration, and then Italy's and Europe's economies will basically recover from being roiled by the populists and nationalists coming to power. And then that will teach the Italian people not to vote for nationalists and populists. So needless to say, the actions by the president lit a firestorm throughout Italy. Immediately, Luigi Di Maio of Five Star called for the president's impeachment. In fact, that was one of the biggest trends this week on Italian Twitter, impeach Mattarella, the president. And Matteo Salvini was demanding snap elections immediately. Forget waiting until next year or even in the summer in August. He wanted elections now, and he was right. A number of polls came out this week showing that Northern League had just surged in popular support, just shy of Five Stars polling. Remember, Northern League got 17% of the vote as part of a coalition of Silvio Berlusconi's Forza Italia, and together they formed a center-right coalition. They got 37% of the vote. Now, what was so stunning was that the far more centrist Forza Italia was supposed to be the dominant party in this right-wing coalition, but it turned out that the far-right Northern League actually became the top party, beating out Forza Italia by several percentage points. And so after Berlusconi basically gave the green light to the League to go ahead and form a government with the populist Five Star, many Forza Italia supporters just jumped ship and are now supporting the League. And so with these polls that came out this week, we're seeing sort of the political realignment taking place right before our very eyes. Northern League got 17% of the vote on March 4th, but if the elections were held today, they would get nearly 30% of the vote, 28 to be exact. I mean, this is just a stunning surge. They've doubled their support. Remember, there have been two regional Italian elections since the March 4th national election, and the League has won both of them. One of them in pretty strong five-star territory. So clearly Italy is turning to the nationalist populace, right? Well, when all said and done, it appears that the Brussels-backed president realized that he miscalculated and that this crisis was only going to get worse. And so it's now being announced that Brussels has in fact backed down after 88 days of impasses and negotiations, after what was really nothing less than a Brussels-backed coup against the two nationalist populist parties forming a coalition. Five Star and Northern League have finally been given the approval to form the first nationalist populist government in Western Europe. Giuseppe Conte will be the new prime minister. He's already been sworn in just a couple of hours ago. Conte is a law professor and what many consider to be one of the intellectual forces behind the populism of Five Star. The League's leader, Matteo Salvini, and Five Star's leader, Luigi Di Maio, will both be sworn in as deputy prime ministers. And how's this for irony? The cabinet minister who caused all these problems to begin with, the one that the president said was the reason why he rejected the coalition, a fellow by the name of Savona, who's written about how Italy can leave the EU and implement its own currency. He's been relocated from finance minister. Now, to get this, he is now Italy's representative in Brussels. He's going to be the European affairs minister, right? The guy who was the supposed reason for rejecting this nationalist populist coalition because he was too anti-EU is now going to be Italy's representative in Brussels. It doesn't get better than that. So what does all of this mean? Well, I think that the New York Times said it best. Let's let the corporatist globalist media admit for us what all of this means, shall we? The Times admits that the rise of Five Star and the League now leaves Italy's traditional establishment, its globalist establishment of either center-left or center-right, in absolute tatters. We've documented this on past videos. The Tony Blair Institute's report on European populism that came out at the end of 2017 documented the results of the 946 European districts that held political elections last year. And in all 946 districts, the center-left coalitions held their own or improved in a mere 56 districts. I mean, that translates to under 6% of European elections. In almost 94% of districts, the center-left lost out to either center-right nationalist populist parties or populist left parties, which are often just as Eurosceptic as the nationalist right. The New York Times has come out and admitted that the center-left parties in Europe are basically going extinct. In many parts of Europe, they're not just in retreat, they have practically ceased to exist. Folks, this is the New York Times talking. This is not wishful thinking on the part of the right. This is the assessment of the globalist media here, okay? They are more and more recognizing that the political left is dying. So I think that's the first takeaway from all of this. The rise of the populist right in Italy, which was unstoppable, is simply the latest and perhaps the most explicit example of the demise of the center-left and even center-right parties in Europe. But obviously, perhaps the single most significant takeaway from all of this is the perilous future of the EU. Make absolutely no mistake, this coalition leaves Brussels completely shell-shocked. You have to remember, and again, this is as the Times reports, Brussels thought they successfully beat back the so-called far right, the populist right last year with defeating Marine Le Pen of France and Geert Wilders in the Netherlands. Go back and read all the headlines around those elections. Of course, all the headlines in the corporatist, globalist media outlets, they all said, the EU is saved, the EU triumphs over nationalism and populism, nationalism dealt a terrible blow, populism pushed back, and on and on and on. They really believed this stuff and celebrated it. But we didn't, not on this channel. You can go back to each of the videos we did on Marine Le Pen and the election in France there and Geert Wilders in the Netherlands. We predicted that this was not the end of nationalist populism. This was, in fact, its beginning. The New York Times goes on to lament that the rise of the far right in Italy could not possibly have come at a worse time for the European Union. Britain is leaving. Angela Merkel is weaker than ever in Berlin. The far right, the AfD, the Alternative for Germany, are now polling as the second most popular party in Germany. Macron in France basically has no allies. Poland and Hungary, indeed the whole of the Visegrad 4 nations along with Austria, have turned solidly to the right and stand together against Brussels. You have what are called the Northern Lights, 8 nations in Northern Europe, ready to team up with the Visegrad Four and Austria to stand together and minimize Brussels' power and influence. And then, on top of it all, you have the President of the United States waging a trade war with the EU with the direct intent of weakening Brussels and bolstering the populist far right throughout Europe. Let's just say the EU has seen better days. And so with the rise of the nationalist populists in Italy, I believe we really are seeing the birth of a new political order in Europe and indeed throughout the entire world. Brussels did everything it could do to stop this, even attempting basically what amounted to be a coup, but to no avail. The nationalist populists have won, and a new political order is rising. As always, please like, comment, and subscribe. Click on that Patreon link below. Become a monthly supporter of this channel and help us to continue to analyze current events in light of conservative trends so that you can personally and professionally flourish. God bless.